What a lovely evening this is. Well, better check my subscribers. Holy moly! 2,000 subscribers? Yes! And I just know what I want to celebrate it with. Let's go. Hello, Team Zug. And today we'll be celebrating a very important video. This video is something I always want to do, and I think it's the perfect time to do it. This is my 2K subscribers video. Now, what is this video about? Well, this video is actually about my All Engines Go OCs. This is a video that I really want to be doing right now. I really want to do. There is always something fun about doing All Engines Go OCs. So today I'll be telling you about them, what their personalities are, what their bases are, and which ones are my favourite and least favourite. Let's go. Oh, and keep in mind that some of these characters aren't really original. I just decided to some cartoon characters and movie characters from franchises and put them into as like trains and all that. So if some of the OCs are familiar to you, I'll tell them who they're supposed to be. Let's go. The first OC is someone that you may remember. This is Andy. Now, if you don't know, Andy was actually the first one that I created. Well, one of the first ones. Now, Andy's actually he's actually one of my favorites. You see, he is based on the Toy Story version of Andy Davis from Toy Story. So I just use Andy and put him as in and make him to my OC Andy. Yep, so how did I make this character? Simple, just reuse Thomas. Now some people think that he's an E2, which this is technically not the case, because Andy is non-E2 tank engine. He actually is an LMS Dockyard Valor 2F tank engine. These tank engines were, I forgot which they were built, they're between the 1920s and 30s era, I believe. And these were used for the dock sides until they were eventually withdrawn from service during the 1960s era, and there are none preserved today. That's a bit sad, to be honest. I decided to use this engine for the basis for Andy is because it looks similar to the E2s, but not an E2. Now, there are some things that are missing, such as the longer boiler, but this is all that I could have. One day, if someone does make a fan art of Andy, I really hope they decide to reuse, like how he's supposed to look like. But just because this is all I just go, it doesn't look that bad. It actually looks pretty good. His rope, his cowboy rope and badge are supposed to represent one of the t-shirts in Toy Story. So yeah, Andy is it's a really good character I created. Next up we got Sid. If there's an Andy, there's going to be a Sid. So Sid was the second one I created. He was created as well as Andy at the same time period. This is Sid's bases. It's supposed to be like one of those Caledonian pugs. Yep, I think that's what they're called. I forgot what they're supposed to be called. And then a basis of Smokey Joe. who is the Hornby train that is really, really fast. And yeah, I've I don't know how many were made, and I don't know when they were all withdrawn and scrapped. But during by the BR logo, it has to be around the 1950s to 60s era, I believe. It's a shame that none of them are preserved today. I choose this engine as the basis for Sid. Is that it's a small saddle tank, so it's really good, and maybe that's why Andy and Sid gets along so well, because they're both from the LMS. So if you've seen this SGPC, what does it stand for? It stands for Sojo's Gunpowder Company. Now, gunpowder is supposed to be one word, but I didn't know at the time, so I thought it was two words, but I like it anyways, it's pretty good. And actually, fun fact, Andy and Sid are actually boyfriends. They're like in a relationship thing. And yeah, Andy and Sid are both, like they're kind of like the G word. And, well, like two guys dating. So, yeah, this is actually not an original idea I had. Fun fact, people in Toy Story actually ship Andy and Sid. Don't believe me? Look. And, well, I actually like the idea, kind of. So I thought, hey, why don't I just use the idea for my Oranges Go overseas? And boom! We have Andy and Sid, the two boyfriend Oranges Go characters. I love both of these. Between the two of them, Sid's my favourite. And, well, Andy's kind of like the cowboy dude, protect and serve. Sid's like kind of the opposite. He still has his Toy Story persona, like Sid Phillips, but he's more, well, he doesn't destroy his own engines, but he does like having fun with gunpowder, and that's really, really all that you can ask for a nicer version of Sid, who's a train. So yeah. Now then, the next one is actually kind of my least favourite character to create, but I still like the character nonetheless. And that character is... here's Sully, or James P. Sullivan, who is he based on. My kind of biggest gripes with this character I created. One, he is basically Gordon, but have different coat of, different paint, different color lining, and NWR on his tender instead of number 4, purple eyes, and a mustache. And here is Sully's real life basis. His real life basis is the LNER V2, and in real life, there's one of them still around. That is 4771 Green Arrow, who is currently preserved on the National Railway Museum, currently being overhauled to get put back into service. And yeah, that is Sully's real life basis. And his personality, he's basically Gordon's personality, but with a minor role. Basically, it's like one of those background characters who'll be like, oh, hello there, youngers. He's basically going to be James's role in All in School, but even a lesser role. But his paint job looks nice though. I'll give myself that. And I guess that's all you could ask for a character who's basically Sully from Monsters Inc. Yep. Although, not a bad character, but I could do a little bit more better with him. Next up, we got the character I really wanted to make. Bob. Y'all know him. He's a character, people. This is the character that everyone that I created, who is basically one of who's just a completely reskin of Billy, but has a much bigger character. Meet Bob. So Bob's role. Bob is basically like the same age as Andy and Sid and all the other young characters in Orange School, like Thomas, Percy, Nia, Con, and Diesel. So, what's this character about? Let's start with his bases. His basis is basically Billy and Charlie's basis, and he's the only character in this list who shares the same basis of two already existing Thomas characters. Now, normally that many people think that's lazy, but to be honest, the Whirl tanks, sorry, I just forgot what they were called, sadly, are some of my favorite steam locomotives. I even made a top 10 best steam locomotives that you should check out. So yeah, that's what I use for the basis of Bob. Now, Bob's personality. Bob is the character I thought of the most here, because I knew he was going to be the biggest character I'm going to create. I even came up with a backstory how he have one eye. Basically, he still has two eyes, but this is Bob without his eye patch. Yeah, he has his eye bulb is completely red, and yeah, Team Suck, you might be asking, Team Suck, how does this happen? Well, I even thought of a backstory. So Bob used to work used to work for the military back on the mainland. This was basically the unlucky Tug version of Sea Roach's backstory. There was obviously a big explosion, trapping Bob's parents inside, and whilst trying to save them, fire got into his eye and made it red. That's not how it's supposed to work, but I don't care. And yeah, that's his backstory. He has an eye patch because he does not want to see people see his completely red eye. And something else I want to add up. Sandy. Sandy is my favorite character from Orange's Go. And the reason I created Bob is also I could ship someone with Sandy with, because I ship my own OC Bob with Sandy, and I love it. It's basically a train take of SpongeBob x Sandy, and I love SpongeBob x Sandy. So yeah, that was kind of one of the big reasons I created Bob. Now you might be asking, how did Bob have parents? My answer is, I don't know. Regardless, Bob is a great OC of mine. Speaking of SpongeBob characters, the next one I have is Patrick. Patrick is the most dumbest character I created, and I like him. So Patrick, I used Diesel for this, and yeah, and here is what Patrick's personality is. He's basically the Patrick from SpongeBob SquarePants personality. His livery is supposed to represent Paxton's livery, but in red. He has buck teeth, and I like it. And here is his bases. And here is Patrick's bases. Now you might think, what is this diesel? And I'm going to tell you. This diesel was called the class D3/12 diesel shunters. They were built in 1937, and sadly, in 1960, they were scrapped. I believe I think 3 of them were only made, and they were all scrapped, with no survivors. Shame. Yep, there were 3. And so, the reason I choose this for the basis of Patrick is because I really think that I really like the idea that there was a diesel in the 1930s, and Patrick is the only one that can go there. Yep, Patrick is definitely one of my favorites. The next one is complicated to say. That one is Mike. Alright, oh boy. This is Mike. Now, you might be asking, Team Zug, who's Mike supposed to represent? And I'll tell you. So, Mike is technically it's actually a freelance design. Or is he? Well, he is. There is no real life versions of Mike existing, but he is technically based on Russell. And if you're a fan of Thomas the Tank Engine, like I am, he's the basis for Freddy. Hi, Freddy. Hello. So yeah, I use this as the basis for Mike because I literally could not think of any other version who could be based on Mike. Yep, and that's Mike for you. He may be weird, but he's a little bit interesting. His personality, he's more like a teenager rather than a kid, making him the first tank engine of my series who's actually a teenager instead of a kid. Now, you might think it's going to be weird, but I don't care. He's basically Sully again, but with some moments here and there. The next one is Eugene, or Mr. Krabs if you're a fan of SpongeBob like me. Now, Eugene, he's a reskin of James. Oh yeah, by the way, Mike's a reskin of Nia. So, yeah. His wheels were painted red, he was painted blue and he was given yellow lining and green eyes. He's supposed to represent Mr. Krabs, and I gotta confess, Mr. Krabs is, in my opinion, the best character in SpongeBob. He's my favorite character. I want to make a whole video on Mr. Krabs one day. Yep, he's basically a good character. Now you might think he's basically Sully again, but here's the twist. The twist is, you won't believe it, Eugene is actually Bob's uncle. Da da da! You might think, Team Sug, how's this possible? Well, I got an answer. So after Bob's parents died of the explosion, Eugene came in and took him in and raised him. You're still using the Unlucky Tug's backstory of Sea Roach, Team Zug, and you'd be right. But this was the only thing I could think of that could be related. So yeah, that was actually a really good idea. I hope you guys liked the idea. And here is Eugene's bases. Now this might be familiar to some people. This locomotive class is the class. This is the G and SWR class 403, I think. Let me check. Yep, is this the 403 class locomotive. And yeah, fun fact, these were originally going to be the basis of James the Red Engine, but it was later changed, so I thought, why don't I just base Eugene off this type of engine? And sadly, they were scrapped between the 1930s, so none of them exist, unfortunately, anymore, sadly. So yeah, this is the basis of Eugene. I hope you liked it. I hope you like this basis for Eugene. Now, this might make Eugene a little bit bland, but to me, he is a really important part of Bob's life. And I think he's a really good character. He's definitely above Sully. So, a few days later, or should I say a few months later, because I decided to go back making the OCs like on Thursday. So, on Thursday, I finally went back to making Orange's Go-Sees, and the first one I came up with was this. Now, who is this character? This character's name is Neil, as you could say right there. Neil's actually a character that's a reference from a TV show called Camp Camp, a really good show, by the way. So, what's his basis? Neil's basis is actually the Elenia J50s. We probably already know about the J50s, so I won't talk about them here, but I will say this. They were originally going to be the same type of tank engine as Thomas, but it was changed to an E2. Now, what is Neil's personality? He's like a little background character that works at the shunting yards. He might talk from time to time, and he's really good friends with Sid, Andy, and the others, including Thomas. Yeah, not much of a personality, but hey, he might be a tiny bit above Sully. Now the next OC is one that I thought of really hard to make. That is Squidward. Mr. Squidward! Now, this is Squidward. He's basically Squidward from SpongeBob. So, what basis is he? Well, if it's pretty obvious, he's based on a London Holden B12. The same base as Alfred, I may add. Yeah, I really love Alfred the B12 as a character, and I actually don't mind the Alfred movies because I think some of them are a little bit enjoyable sometimes. So yeah, I decided, I'm gonna base the B12s off Squidward. So I used an edit for this. Firstly, I removed the wheel because the B12s only have 2 front wheels and 6 back wheels. And yep, I changed the face and the tender design and customizing, and boom, we're done. It may be easy to some, but it was really tricky. But all in all, I'm happy at the end. Squidward is such a good character. His personality, he's a grumpy engine, and I also liked him as the mixture between his SpongeBob counterpart, and Top Hat from Tugs. That's actually a really good idea. In fact, I even have plans to make my own All Engines Go High Tide, and he's basically playing a role's Top Hat, so check that out. It's not out yet, but don't worry, I'm still planning on it. Now, the next one is technically not an OC, but he technically is. He's a real-life steam locomotive. Here he is. Meet Bear. Now, Bear is based on a real-life steam locomotive, and this steam locomotive is actually one of my least favorites. But I'm now starting to feel sympathy for it, and I'm starting to like it a little bit. If you guess the number 111 and the name, you probably guess which engine this is based on. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Bear. Behold, we have the Great Bear. Wow, to be honest, I never thought I'll say this, but I feel bad for the Great Bear, kind of. I mean, sure, it's still bad, but nowadays I feel sympathy for it, and I kind of regret putting him on my top 8 worst steam locomotives list. I mean, it was the first Pacific, but yet again, it was really bad performance, but it had potential. So if I want to make a remake of my top 8 worst steam locomotives list, I might take the Great Bears off and maybe put them in the dishonorable mention list, because I'm kind of warming up to it. Kind of. My headcanon is that Bear is the Great Bear, and instead of getting rebuilt, I like to think the person who built the Great Bear, that is George Jackson Churchward. I like to think that George Jackson Churchward, maybe saved him from being turned into a a castle locomotive, or maybe scrapped, and sell him off to the Fat Controller, and boom, he's on Sodor. He has NWR, but he has his original number, and his name was changed to Bear for short. Plus, I could not fit the Great Bear on it. So yeah, his personality, he's basically like Zoran from Tugs. He's a little bit nasty, but not as nasty as Alfred the London B12. And he does have a heart, but he is a little bit mischievous. In fact, I even plan to make my own version of Trapped and Olish's Ghost Style. He's Zoran and Patrick's Zug, and they completely have a few old box fans and just basically block the tracks. It's going to be an audio story, by the way. So yeah, Bear. Although the Great Bear is not really the best steam locomotive, Bear as a character is a really good character. Man, for once, I'm actually glad I kind of like the Great Bear, kind of. The next character is my first female character I created, Nikki. Now, Nikki is actually, if you look closely, she has the exact same logo as Sid and the same lettering as him. Here's something that is also going to shock you. In my All Engines Go series, Nikki and Sid are actually siblings. Nikki's like the older sister, and Sid's the younger brother. That's actually a really good idea. I know they're not the same type of engine, but I don't really care. So, yeah. Now, what's Nikki's basis? Nikki's based on the LMS 2P tender engine. They were built between, I forgot when they were built, and they were scrapped during the 1950s or 60s. They were supposed to make a comeback, but the project was dropped due to lack of subscribers, sadly. Although the 2Ps are not going to return to the world anytime soon, we'll have Nikki to represent them. That's something. So yeah, Nikki's based on Nikki from Camp Camp. As you can see, the bandages. I even made my custom one right there. Her personality's like, she's a little bit crazy, like Sid, but she does know what's going to happen, and she's careful. Sometimes she even scolds Sid sometimes, which is kind of funny. And the last character I created is Max. Max was the last character I created, and man did I go out in a bang. So, who is Max? Max is based on the LMS IFET 2010 engine version. And yeah, as you can see here, yeah, his personality. So he works on Sodor. You might think he's basically another one of those background engines like Sully and Neil, but really, he's actually really, really close to the gunpowders. I mean, he's not owned by it, but he mostly takes field trains the gunpowder between the mainland and to the gunpowder area to make the actual dynamite, whilst Nikki and Sid make it at the gunpowder factory which they work at. And here's something that many people would probably like. Max and Nikki are actually in a relationship. Now that is something really interesting. Max x Nikki is more like a reference to everyone's favorite ship in Camp, Max x Nikki. It's actually, Max x Nikki, in my opinion, is one of the best, if not the best, cartoon ships in the entire world, and the best Camp ship ever made. I love Camp. It's a show that I'm getting into, and I'm really excited to watch more of it. So, whoever makes Camp, make this ship canon, please. And we're done. Boy, I spent the last 30, if not 31 seconds talking about characters that I created. I actually love making all engines go OCs, and I think Max is not going to be the last. I really enjoyed making these characters. They're really enjoyable. I really enjoy thinking of ideas for these characters and expanding on them. So, if I have to choose between these characters, who would I pick from worst to best? Here's my list. My list goes something like this: Sully, Neil, Mike, Eugene, Max, Nikki, Squidward, Bear, Patrick, Andy, Sid, and number 1, Bob. Now, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please subscribe and give me a thumbs up. Now then, if you want me, I have plans to make my top 20 Thomas characters soon, so look out for that. This is Team Zug signing out. Peace out, and thank you for 2,000 subscribers.